Okay, great. Well, good evening in India and good morning in New York. Welcome to everyone wherever you are around the world. My name is Tej Pavan Gandhok. I'm a Vice Dean for Communication and Outreach here at the Jindal Global Business School at Jindal Global University. And welcome to our second masterclass series for our one-year Global MBA in Business Analytics. And we're absolutely delighted to welcome Mr. Sagar Shah, who's client partner at Fractal Dimension and has played a very integral role in helping give us invaluable inputs in as well as encouragement and very useful insights in shaping the design of this new one-year MBA program. And we're absolutely delighted that he is offered us willing support to continue on the journey by agreeing to serve as a honorary industry practitioner faculty with the program. So without much further ado, welcome Sagar. Thank you so much for your time and for sparing the time whilst you're in New York for this session. We really appreciate it, and to give us some thoughts and perspectives on the analytics careers industry and also career prospects in there. So let me hand it over to you, and we'll do this in two parts. I think if you could please give a brief introduction to yourself, Sagar, your journey, as well as give us some perspective on how Fractal is positioned within the analytics consulting landscape, and where the bumping intersection points are with the tech consulting as well as the management consulting, analytics arms. And then, if you could share some of your thoughts and perspectives, and then towards the back end, we'll have a bit of an interactive discussion about career prospects and career paths. So over to you, Sagar. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Pritesh. Thank you so much for inviting me here. Firstly, it's a privilege to be here, speaking to all the great students and professors and the whole community in general. After so long, we have all come together, and it's very enlightening to see how Jindal University is also creating this interdisciplinary program. So very helpful, and we'll talk about these things in much more detail today. I wanted to quickly quick start. I have a lot to share. Firstly, quick introductions. Myself, I've been in the analytics industry for about 15 years now. I graduated from IIT Bombay long back, experimented with chemical engineering, rheology, biochemistry was an interesting pivot. I went to TIFR, Mumbai, NCBS, Bangalore, Germany, University of Karlsruhe, did all that experimental research and realized it's too slow for me. So I wanted to move to corporate, and math and consulting is what was, on my mind. So I experimented with Fractal. This was 15 years ago, and I haven't left since. So it's clearly been a very rewarding journey, both professionally and personally. I started in Mumbai, traveled around the world, and finally, settled in Jersey City near New York. And I've been here since then. I was an early member in Fractal, shaping the company. The US operations had two people when I joined here. It was the CEO of Fractal today, and myself. And of course, then we hired a bunch of folks, and the growth story has been amazing. It's grown, I want to say 100, 200 times maybe in the last 15 years. It was a very small startup at that stage, and 20 years ago it was such a nascent industry in general. You did not believe that math can solve problems for business. It was all intuition led and business management led, right? But clearly today we can see, and I'll share a bit about that as well, how all, not just small, large, medium, all companies of the world are thinking on pivoting on data-based decision making. And to make decisions based on data, there is a lot that goes in. And there is, of course, the analytic structures in the organizational, the budgets, where do they spend, the skill sets and competencies of people. Do you hire people? Do you train people? Or do you hire, suppliers and vendors and consultants? So there's a lot out there. There are 10,000 companies in the world today doing analytics. So how do you choose? And then what makes an analytical professional successful? That's a very big topic of its own. I think that would be the focus of this talk as well. But let's first start with how the industry has shaped. So if you go to the history, 20 years ago in India, there was no analytics happening. Maybe a very few people in HSBC or maybe a bank or two banks were doing some analytics for application scorecarding or attrition scorecarding and so on, right? Even then, it was not believed to be the game changer, but it was just something they were experimenting with. Globally, of course, there was a lot of analytics going on, not as much as today, of course, because of lack of data. But companies like P&G, Google were already on that journey. And they had set up processes and systems to start experimenting. And of course, it does take leadership at the top to do that. Looking at that, companies like Fractal started the journey. And now, when you look at it today, there is a very big crowd of companies entering analytics as an industry. But if you just cut through the clutter and say, what do analytic companies do? We use data to provide analytical solutions to solve some business problems. If you frame it that way, then there are very few number of companies who are actually just doing that, what we call as pure play analytics companies, which are just doing analytics. And analytics includes, artificial intelligence, machine learning, data engineering, designing the right problem, and so on. But when you go out of this arena and look at all the strategy consulting firms who are designing business strategies, all the tech firms who are basically setting up infrastructures and systems, all the product companies who are solving only one problem for the entire world, very specific, narrowly defined problem, but having a very big impact in that problem area. So there are so many companies and everybody's trying to, merge together. So imagine there was a McKinsey who was doing, strategy consulting since so many decades, right? They are the best at that, McKinsey, BCG. I'm counting, the top 5-6 companies in that arena. Then there are the tech companies, Infosys, Wipro, TCS, and so on, right? Who are very good at the technology foundations of organizations. And they are, of course, very successful. They are the growth story of India. And now look at in the middle, there is a company of Fractal, like Fractal and other such, latent views of the world, who are specifically solving only article problems. What has happened is the strategy consulting firms are entering in this area from the top. They have launched, BCG Gamma, McKinsey Quantum Black. There is IBM Garage. There are just so many different companies. These companies have launched or created or incubated in their own organizations. These are large companies now. It's not like they're 100 people. They're thousands of people. And then if you look at the technology companies, they have also moved up. They are, increasing their share of pie, and they are hiring analytics. They are training themselves of analytics, and they're also, so they have very large relationships with corporates, Fortune 500 companies. So they are slowly penetrating that. So these are the two shifts that are happening. I'm not talking about the knowledge outsourcing or KPO companies like Genpact and BPO companies like those purposefully, because they are again very massive, but we don't encounter them a lot today. But they are also doing a lot of analytics as part of their entire contracting cycles. So that's the entire gamut, right? And if you look at the top maybe 50 companies in this, all 50 are doing a great job in driving analytics in organizations, and it is only going to grow from here. There is no signs of shortage of budgets or interest at the board level, the C-suite at all. So it's safe to say this is going to continue for the next 5 to 10 years at least. Maybe 10 years later, there might be commoditization into products or stuff like that may happen. Still not sure, because it's such a wide space. It's almost like there's an observable universe here, but it's always expanding, right? So you never know what's out there. Which other problems will we be able to solve using analytics, machine learning? We're not sure right now, right? So that's sort of the perspective of the industry. And I took most Indian names, but there are, of course, other global players like Palantir. There is IBM, of course. There is Deloitte, PwC. All these companies are also very high on analytics. ZS Associates, I think, is a very big name in the pharma world. Latent View, of course, Tiger Analytics, and so on. There's a bunch of good companies out there. And the happy note is that almost all of them have Indian C-suite or CEOs or founders. So Indians are making a big impact on the analytics space. Almost, I would say more than 50% of analytics AI CEOs in the world today maybe an Indian. So that's a proud moment for us. And so there is an ecosystem developing where everybody is trying to shape it together. Of course, there's a competition, but there's healthy competition. And we're also looking at IPOs happening very soon, right? Latent View happened just now, a few months ago. This year, it may happen with other such companies in the space. And hopefully, it will grow the pie. So that's a quick, note on that. Let me go a little bit of detail on, what are the changes happening? Let me start sharing my screen. All right. Display. All right. Hopefully this is visible.
Not yet.
No?
Not yet.
Okay. Then I have to reshare. Oh, okay. I have to press share. Sorry.
Yeah. There we go.
My bad.
It's working. It's started. I mean, it's just processing. Yep, it's working.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think
You just maximize the screen, the page, the slide view. Yeah.
All right. Now
Perfect.
See the whole screen, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. Perfect. So, all right. A few themes in this session would be, of course, how to build an analytics professional who's effective, but also focus on the fundamentals. So what are the fundamentals that we're going to talk about? We were just having this chat right before entering this session. It's not just the tech elements that are successful in analytics. So you of course need to know what is machine learning, how do you drive analytics to machine learning, build successful use cases and so on. But there is a very big design element to the problem. How do you design the problem in the right way? Are you solving the right problem? Is it framed in the right way? Is it framed for the right stakeholders? Are you understanding what stakeholders are there, right? Just to give a quick example. So if you're selling a diaper, right, who are you selling it to? Diaper is of course made for the baby. So the features and the functional elements of the diaper are necessarily for the consumer here. However, the selling is happening to the mother. So your shopper is the mother or the father in some cases, right? So you have to target them saying, your baby is of course going to benefit, but what is the price point? How do, babies are not watching television ads. So, is the mother and father watching the television ad? Where can you reach them? Is there a moment that matters? Can you go to the hospital where, the delivery is happening? So the problem definition here has to be, very carefully sorted. Otherwise, the end outcome will not be very clear. So that's I'm going to double down on this, in a few minutes. So let's go, I'm going to rush through a few concepts here. First, analytics is not just building models. So the way analytics is shaping up today is how can we cause the digital transformation in the world? And you must have heard digital transformation. I'm going to deep dive into that. So what does digital transformation really mean, right? It can be, transforming people, which is digitization of the organization, giving them power, on their fingertips. If you can give them data on their mobile phones, can they make decisions looking at the data quickly? Can they collaborate with other people in the organization quickly? Can they look at ambitions? If I have 30% sales targets this year, can I achieve that because of digitization? Probably yes. Can I increase the adoption of my products or technologies by the consumers, by my shareholders, stakeholders, everybody? That is the people transformation element. Digital transformation is the intelligence augmentation. So are you able to edit or add more intelligence to the already existing? So for example, if you're predicting, forecasting something like a supply chain demand planning, right? How many toothpastes can I make in the next 3 months, for example? Just a simple problem, right? It looks very simple. It's a damn tough problem because you don't know where the demand is coming from, which state of India, which country of the world. Will it change because of COVID wave number 7? Will my shortage of employees cause some issues? Are my manufacturing machines, operating in the right way? Do I have the raw material procured in the right way? Do I have the working capital to actually make the production? Once I make the production, will it be stored in the right warehouse? Can I consider the logistics from the warehouse to the retailer warehouse or to an e-commerce channel? So all of these problems come in when you're thinking of just one simple forecast. So it is not just the forecast that the analytics professional has to worry about. It is the entire ecosystem and how do all the variables play, and what are you building which will solve all the open-ended questions. So that is what I'm saying. You have to augment intelligence, not just from one problem or one machine or one algorithm, but a lot of different systems, right? And all of it maybe across functions. So you'll have to make it accessible to anyone everywhere in the organization. And eventually all of them should agree to that single truth. That's the problem we are trying to solve through digital transformation. And finally, the process transformation. Are you able to follow a certain specific process? I've just shown an example here, but are you discovering the problem, diagnosing the problem, deliberating and deciding, all of this happening very, very quickly using data, right? So how can you enable that? Using analytics. And analytics does mean you have to think of data sets, use cases, what are the objectives, what is the physical space in which you are solving the problem? What is the cloud infrastructure? What are the technologies you're using? How are you making sure that it's going to get adopted? What is the change management process? How are you governing whether there is no privacy loss, there is no ethical issues, there's no security issues? What is the ROI of the engagement? If you don't show ROI, somebody's going to cut the budget and say this initiative is over. So all of these are the elements that you'll need to think over, and that's how deep you'll have to go, right? And most companies have various strategies. They either build it in-house, they hire people from analytics, or they teach people analytics. And then in most cases, there are also a blended way of solving problems. Various functions come together with IT, analytics, finance, marketing, sales, supply chain, and they also bring in the best leadership from the outside in. So they bring in other suppliers who have done this for the last few decades. So that will help the company grow as a whole. And then you can also benchmark, where is your organization? There are various types of organization. Traditional analytics organization, where very few people in the organization use data. I wouldn't take names, but there are many traditional companies, right, who do this. Then analytics is a contributor. Small little analytics is happening. Let's say the forecast is happening, some predictions are happening, some marketing ROI decisions are being taken, and so on. That would be a contribution, of analytics to these functions. Then there is strategic analytics, where all execs are using analytics, all functions are using analytics, and then a lot of decisions are being taken. And then finally, it's AI as a competitive advantage. This is where your Amazon, Googles of the world are, right? If you remove the AI from it, the company would fall down. They would not be able to function. So that's the competitive advantage. And because of AI and machine learning, that they are, where they are, topmost, successful companies of the world. So where do you lie as an organization? How do you transform this journey as well, right? There are various concepts here. So first is, how do you build a strategy of the analytics organization? Various functions you need. So this is this is a general framework which is called a Lafley model. It's a why, which is a vision, where to play, how to win, and then what capabilities do we develop, right? So this is a simple slider to explain that strategy from an analytics organization perspective. There are various org structures that are possible: federated, centralized, decentralized. There are, of course, competencies of people. You need functional competency. The analytics person should know, if they're solving a marketing problem, what is the marketing function? What is marketing? What is ROI? What are the marketing vehicles? Well, how do you measure impact? There are impressions, there are spends, there are TPRs. There is a lot of digital spend that is happening. So what types of vehicles within digital? Is Facebook and Twitter giving you the same ROI, and so on? So you'll have to really go into detail, understand the business problem, and link it to these marketing vehicles. Unless you do that, the marketing function is not going to engage with the analytics professional. Same thing with every other function, right? So you need to basically develop domain expertise along with analytics expertise, along with problem framing or design expertise. That's when you will become, a good professional. That's what the organization needs. And finally, processes and tools and technology. All of this has to be executed someday, right? So how do you make a process which is repeatable? If you're running 100 use cases per month, let's say if you go to a large company like P&G, Google, Verizon, Microsoft, Facebook, Amazon, even Indian large companies, right? Infosys and so on, right? There are a lot of processes which enable analytics, data governance, data storage, How do I migrate data from one older technology to the newer technology? Data warehousing. Then what are the tools that you use on the cloud? So do you have a multi-cloud engagement, or you have a single cloud? Have you married to AWS, Google, or Azure, right? And within those, which softwares are you using? Because each decision is going to take a lot of implementation time and energy from a lot of people. If you decide I want to use SageMaker for all my models in a company, you have to train 1,000 people on SageMaker, and it's not an easy software, right? And no software is easy, and no software is hard. For an engineer, it's everything is the same, but you'll have to keep learning, right, when you change decisions. So that's the decision on tool technology. And of course, how you scale. Once you use a particular software, how are you scaling that across all your business use cases? So this actually is a very tough decision: which cloud to use, which software to use, how do we train, what is the success criteria? Because almost all softwares are competing at the same level today, if you really go into that. So that's some of the decisions. We've talked about the analytics strategy model. I'll skip this for now. Yeah, digital transformation. This is funny image, but this is quite real. If you go into organizations today and say, hey, what is digital transformation? Somebody will say, it's working on the mobile phone. Somebody will say, all data set led transformation. Or somebody will say, hey, my sales team should always be digital, or my selling should always be online, or something else. So everybody's looking at it very differently. And there's no single definition here as well. Let's go to one more concept, which is adoption. When you're doing something new, how do you make people adopt it, right? And it sounds very cliche, but if you develop a new product, let's say I develop an analytics product today, and sell it to a company, will they adopt it, or will they just buy it and store it and kill it after a year? That's the major problem happening in many organizations today, because a lot of people are doing a lot of analytics, but they're not thinking on the irrational or the emotional aspects of the users. You need to co-create with the users from the start. You need buy-in, you need co-creation testing with them. You should understand the user journeys. You should understand which pain points are you trying to solve for exactly. You should understand the ecosystem of stakeholders. While you are targeting one user, there might be 3 other users who are probably not want to care about the solution. So there's a lot going on in the brain, and Mr. Tejpavan would explain this better, right? That from a neuroscience perspective, any decision that you make is already made by the emotion in the brain. While you are targeting the rational part of the brain, you need to also look at the emotional part of the brain, because 99.9% decisions are happening because of emotions, not because of logic. That might be contrary to popular logic. Let me skip this. It's too detailed. All right, so I explained a bunch of concepts, and we will do a little bit of Q&A also on this. But let me explain you 5 examples of how analytics is fundamentally changing business models. And then these are across C-suite. This is across functions, media, sales, manufacturing, R&D, and so on. So it'll be interesting. Let me see if I can. I hope you guys have seen this video, because this was a very popular video last Diwali. I don't know if you will hear this sound. Can you hear it?
Go ahead, play it. If you can just increase the volume just to the right of your play button.
You can't hear it?
Yeah, if you can just increase the volume, you see that volume button next to your play button? Yeah, go ahead.
Is the money bounding up the cost by the choice of fashion safety? Safety.
sound is not great, Sagar. So maybe you could just explain it through.
All right, I'm going to stop sharing now.
Yeah.
So the point I wanted to make, I don't know to the third, but if you can go through the ad at your own time, right? The point is, this was a hyper local advertisement made by Mondelez for targeting every consumer in their location. So if you're in, you're in a district in Delhi versus a district in Bombay, the ad will be different. If you're in Delhi, district A versus district B, even spread out by 1 kilometer, the ad is different. And all of this is happening because there is a deep fake algorithm, which is known as generalized adversarial network, which is being used in the backend. And you don't, frankly, today, Shah Rukh Khan is actually not required in the video. That's the truth. You can actually do this without Shah Rukh Khan, and you can create it on your laptop right now in 15 minutes. You can create this ad. Now, this is not known to people, but there's a lot of companies working on it. This concept is a very old concept, which has been now brought to analytics, saying, can we hyper localize mass advertising? And does that help the society? Of course it does, right? Like every Kirana store in India now has their own Shah Rukh Khan ad, which was unthinkable. The reason I'm sharing this is a disruption in the media space, which is possible through analytics. And there are various examples which we did 5 years ago, right? Like if you place an ad in a football stadium or IPL, right? I can actually measure how much revenue that one ad on that sideboard in the billboard, right? Or the cheerleader carrying some pom-pom ball. If you write a name of your brand, I know exactly how much that has driven revenue in the next 3 months for that brand. Now, all of this is possible using analytics, video analytics, audio analytics, text analytics, deep learning models, and so on. Now, and this is all scaled, by the way. This is not just one-off. We can actually write a code which will scale this for the globe and for a sustained period of time. So that's an example of a business disruption happening because of analytics. Let me move, and I just explain a few things. The other example is customer service, right? You must have, I don't know if you've used it, but HDFC Bank has this app called Eva, where you can actually chat with it on Eva. And this is also possible on other channels, by the way. There's a company called Senseforth, part of Fractal, which does this. We also launched an app called Umang with Government of India. Again, very similar. You can actually just say, send me my COVID certificate, or send me, my Aadhaar card, send me this, send me that. You can just type it or speak to it, and it will send it to you. Now, imagine the power of this for billion citizens, right? 1.3 billion citizens using your phone and using WhatsApp, or using an app to just get their information on time for their use case. Imagine a laborer in Karnataka, saying, can you help me calculate my income tax on a WhatsApp message? That's all possible. It's happening live. India digital transformation is quite live. And I'm sitting in New York. I can I can tell you this is not happening in US as well. US is far behind digital transformation compared to what's happening in India today. My COVID certificate is a piece of paper, by the way, and I have lost it. So I actually have trouble getting into Microsoft, Google offices today. They ask for that physical certificate, which is crazy, So really analytics is driving digital transformation. And if you see what's behind this chatbot, right, there's a machine learning algorithm going on, which will understand what you said. It will match it to the algorithms called word to vec and so on. It will match to exactly what the machine understands you're looking for, and it'll tell you what's required. And otherwise, of course, you can give feedback. So this is going at scale, and imagine the population scale of this. Now, I think I already talked about forecasting a little bit, so I'll not bore you with that detail. Then image analytics, you can actually, if you know that there are people called auditors who go to the store, check whether the number of products on the shelf are as per the plan. What is the price of the product? What is the size of the product? How many type of products or facings are there? All of this is automated now. You can actually just put a camera, or you can fly a drone and say, hey, can you check my compliance in the store? Imagine the pain that the person used to take through. Now this person can actually sit at home, look at it from his mobile phone, his or her mobile phone, and exactly do an analysis and say, hey, there's 20% less products, let's send the products so there is no out of stock and the consumers don't face a deficiency. And this is a live problem globally, right? Every store has an out of stock problem at some point in time. If you think of Walmart or Target or Hypercity or Heiko or whatever, any store in the world can use it. So again, this is right at your doorstep. Now imagine driving better decisions. Now this is a very interesting use case. If I write on Twitter, I want this. I want a funky soap, which smells like chocolate, for example, right? It's possible that a company will launch it in the next 2 months because 10,000 people like Sagar have asked for it. Now imagine how this is happening. I wrote on Twitter, somebody wrote on a blog, somebody wrote somewhere else, on Amazon product reviews, they wrote something. There is a company who's, mining all that data and figuring out, this is what people are talking about. We should launch a product here. There's a market opportunity. And maybe it's a $500 million market opportunity. So let's launch it. It will cost us $20-30 million. Hopefully we'll take 2-3 months to launch it. And let's just do it digitally. We don't have to worry about, all these retailers and all. And this is not fiction. This is actually happening as we speak. Many products in the world have been launched this way. Just looking at Twitter data, what do people need? Earlier, we used to run surveys, ask people, go, hey, what do you want as tomorrow's product? But in the live hot state, people are not able to answer. They don't even know what they are saying, right? But when I'm writing it on Twitter, I'm actually spending my energy and emotion on it, right? Or any other website. So these products are also available. So innovation has pivoted really, really well. What used to take 2-3 years is now happening in 6 months. This is real. This is happening across Fortune 100 companies. Mobile, tracking. I won't go through this. I think let's skip this. Tuberculosis. Healthcare. A lot of diseases are now being solved by AI. Not solved, as in diagnosed and treated by AI. There are vaccinations, which is also being created by molecular simulations and so on. This is an example of a company which is part of Fractal called Cure.ai, which uses computer vision. It has trained on 10 million X-rays and CT scans, and it basically predicts whether you have COVID, tuberculosis, pulmonary fibrosis, and so on within 3 seconds. And the radiologist, of course, takes 45 minutes at 85% accuracy. Machine is, of course, 99.9% accurate. Now, we are not saying, replace a radiologist. Radiologist is required to treat, but the diagnosis time can be reduced significantly, and the scale of diagnosis can increase. So 1 million people die of tuberculosis, for example, right? They don't die because there's no medicine. They die because they don't know they are tuberculosis, because there are no doctors available. So if you go to Philippines or rural India or Africa or Latin America, even in America's US, right? The number of radiologists is 1 per, I think, 10 million people. It's very low. It's impossible. So automation has to be used. So computer vision is solving this problem. Cure.ai is in 50 countries today. It's being used for in hospitals. It's FDA approved. This is all real stuff happening right now. So, and this is just one example. There are hundreds of such companies in the world which are helping healthcare, which is AI for good, right? So such things are happening. One tricky thing is, can you trust a machine? So I talked about the Shah Rukh Khan ad, right? Deepfake technology. Now imagine this. I think we all know who this is. This is Obama. But the way machine understood and is trying to recreate the image is this. Because the training data has always been of white males. Now this is an ethical dilemma in the AI world today. How much should we trust AI? Because it will always tell you what has been there. It may not be able to predict what's the reality. And this is a problem. It's unsolved. Many companies are trying to solve. Fractal is also trying to solve this. We have regulations and frameworks coming in. We are also working with NASCOM, Ministry of Electronics and IT in India, and Government of Netherlands, Government of US, to actually implement these regulations, saying, hey, this should never happen. Because if this happens, this is just an example, but imagine this happening at scale, right? It can be havoc. People can police, and unfortunate incidents can happen based on these. And it's already happening. This is not far away from the truth. Credit card loans are being rejected because of lack of history of Black people or Hispanic people or Indian people in the US. And that's just a financial matter. If you look at prisons, the parole or the bail is being given in the US based on machine learning today. You won't believe it. So, and the data always predicts, give more bail to white people rather than Black people. That's so unfortunate, right? And imagine that happening in India. Imagine in India, I won't speak about religion, but let's say older people are getting less bail, younger people are getting more bails, right? That's not right. So all of this is possible to go wrong. So we have to really be careful, look at the regulations. Now let's talk of, I think I'm at 35 minutes, right? So yeah, we have good enough time to talk about this now. And I think we'll get into an interaction as well now. What do we need to accelerate the business impact of AI? And this is an equation our dear CEO Shrikant created, and it really speaks to me. We always think of analytics impacting business, right? So what are the results dependent on? Of course, we need analytics, AI, machine learning. That's given. But more important is engineering and design. And why do we say that? You can solve one problem on one day, one time, and it will have some impact. But now you want that impact to last long. You want that to be sustainable. 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. Can you develop into a program? To do the program, you need automation of data pipelines. External data, internal data, structured data, unstructured data. All of it has to be merged, harmonized, stored, and be used on a continuous basis with the right governance so that the data quality doesn't suffer. All of this is engineering. A lot of companies are getting into this. This is where the clouds of the world, Azure, AWS, GCP, are masters, right? That the softwares are there, but we need people to actually do the hard work, which is build a pipeline, right? And check and govern. So that is actually the very, very big piece of AI and analytics today, which doesn't get spoken about a lot. The third piece is design. I talked about this. So behavioral design, cognitive sciences have really progressed so much that you can understand what is the pain point from an emotional perspective of the end user. Now, when you're developing an analytics product, you also need to think about who are you developing it for? What are the user stories? What are the maps? What processes do they follow? Can I reduce the redundancy in the process? Which problem do I really want to solve for? Can I solve all user stories or problems, or should I solve for some? And then finally, adoption. Once you solve the problem, will people actually use your solution? I can create the best solution in the world. If nobody uses it, what's the point? You can think of nuclear fission, right? It solved the energy crisis, frankly, right? If you use nuclear fission today, there's no energy crisis today, but nobody's using it. Why? Because adoption is low. Why? Because people are scared. There's a lot of fear. And it was not designed in the right way by governments that, this is a solution. So a brilliant solution can go to waste if you don't design it correctly from the user perspective, and if you also don't design the adoption perspective. And change management is just post hoc. It's not sufficient. Change management assumes that I will build a product, I'll give it to you, and you will use it, and I will train you how to use it. That doesn't work anymore. You need to be part of the journey to be able to use it. So that's how the first equation speaks. The second equation is more technical. Error is inversely proportional to multiple things. How much data are you feeding the model? Because the more the data, the more the algorithm is able to churn, and the more accurate the model is becoming. That's number one. Number two, to do all of this, you need compute power. Otherwise, your data will run for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks. Nobody has the patience to wait for that, right? You need a vast amount of computing power, GPUs, big data technologies. Again, all of this is available on the cloud now. You don't have to buy huge servers and keep it in your, bedroom or in the organization, right? And then finally, the technique, which is the algorithm type that you're using. Are you using deep learning? Are you using linear regression, logistic regression, DRL or so on, right? And you necessarily don't need a sophisticated technique all the time. There are at least 50% of the cases don't need deep learning. They need just linear regression, for example, right? So it's a simple technique. It runs faster. It consumes less resources, gives you explainable models, and more. In many cases, it's sufficient, right? The third is organizational effectiveness. This is where companies struggle, right? Where they want to develop the analytical expertise. So talent is, of course, absolutely important. If you don't have the right talent, just put T is equal to 0, and everything is 0 in this slide. So talent is absolutely important. Culture. Do execs believe that analytics is important? Is there a culture of challenging each other? Is there a culture of experimentation? Can you fail? If I fail, will I be fired? Or will I be congratulated, saying, great, now you can move on to the next experiment? That's how Fractal is developed, right? That if you fail, they actually celebrate. Because you have at least canceled one possibility. Let's move on to the next. And then finally, governance. Governance is absolutely the bedrock of if something goes wrong, what happens? How can we avoid or prevent something going wrong from a data perspective, from an organizational perspective? Are the structures in the right way? For example, there is a foresight team that's required in many companies. It's not there. But unless you have that, you're not going to create the next future innovation. And for that next future innovation, you need to have a data partnership. Which data set provider will you partner with, right? All of these are open questions. And if you just build a machine learning model, you can't get the answer. You need a separate thinking around it, right? So those are some, competencies that are required. And an analytics professional needs all of these. You can't assume, I know machine learning and I don't know nothing else, then you won't succeed. You can't say, I know GCP, I know Google Cloud Platform very well, and I know nothing else. Then you can't succeed in analytics. You need to know at least enough in all of it, and you need to be the master of one of these very deeply. It's like the T of consulting, right? You need to be the master of one, but you need to be the jack of all trades. So that's how I would describe it. I have just one more slide, and then I'll hand it over to for questions. So this is how we at Fractal think of it, and I'm very happy to see Jindal University also thinks in a very similar way, right? Interdisciplinary skills is what is required for problem solving. If you just open one part of your brain, it's not going to solve it, and that's a very unfortunate metaphor, right? But you need all sorts of skills coming together, and this is where creativity comes in. You need to be creative to be able to solve the problem in the right way. Just solving it using a machine or an algorithm or data set is not sufficient. You need to be a little more empathetic toward people. The design work actually you can replace with empathy. If you understand the end user, if you stand in their shoes and then create the solution, that will work better, much better in most cases. Of course, AI analytics and engineering we have talked about, so I won't bore you with that. So I'll pause here. So Tej Pawan, we can have a quick discussion around it.
Fabulous, Sagar. Thank you so much. That was really quite a masterful masterclass, and I think you very effectively, that's perfect. Very effectively conveyed, the many important dimensions that are required for effective end outcomes and results in analytics consulting, and I think it's almost a case of that it's no longer about being T, that it does appear that there need to be multiple legs to the stool, and it seems like,
yes.
Whether an M is sufficient or whatever, but essentially you do need depth along multiple dimensions as well as breadth. And so it's no longer sufficient to be a mile, broad. You do need to be able to go more than an inch deep in a few of these dimensions. So that I think you conveyed that very masterfully. So that I think helps us segue to some of the career-related questions and conversations. And perhaps as a starter, and in all of these 3 or 4 questions that I'd love to engage with you, I'd request if you could first give, your perspective, a fractal perspective, and then to the extent that there are, differing perspectives in other parts of the analytics consulting industry, given it's always a rapidly evolving place, please feel free to give us those different flavors. So perhaps first off, what are some of the entry points, within Fractal? Where do you hire from, particularly, at MBA level or undergrad levels? If you could give us some feel for the entry points, and what do you look for in those people, and then we'll move on from there.
Sure. So firstly, my perspective is we should there is no one right skill here that we hire for. Like if you hire a senior management person, you can go to IIM Ahmedabad and hire somebody, right? That's very simple and straightforward decision. For analytics, it's not that straightforward. So we do hire from IIM Ahmedabad, for example, but for different skill sets. But we look at 3 things: humble, hungry, and smart. Humble is because of the organization culture that we have at Fractal. It's not necessary for other organizations, but we stress very heavily on, are you humble enough to say I'm wrong and I will learn? Because the analytics industry is evolving so fast. If at one point you say, I know enough, then you're dead. In 2 years, you're done. Even our CEOs are learning, new algorithms, new softwares every year. So you need to be very humble that you are a very small part of this whole industry, and it's very evolving very, very fast, and you can't do everything. So you need to learn what you need to learn. Then, humble, hungry. Are you hungry to create impact? And it is going to be tough because there's a lot of competition, there's a lot of ambiguity. There's no one playbook in the world saying, hey, if you do this, you're done. You can follow this and you'll be successful. It's evolving, and there are multiple playbooks, and the industries are also, varying. If you go to an oil company and use analytics to predict something, versus if you go to Indian Navy and predict, whether a flight is going to crash, or if you go to taxation in India, for example, and say how much fraud is happening, or if you go to a Britannia and say, how much corn flour I need in the biscuit on day one because of the, and so on, right? All of these are so different. You can't say I'm going to apply this one playbook and that's it. No, you will have to evolve. So you need to have to learn with the industry, with your peers, with the masters, with colleagues, and so on. So so you need to be very hungry. Otherwise somebody will come and say, hey, this guy doesn't know anything. And you need to be showcasing that eagerness. You have to lean in. You have to bend over and know. In Fractal, we say, if a client says, the floor is dirty, then you better, pick up the broom and start cleaning it. You don't have to feel, oh, I'm a client partner at Fractal, so why should I do? No, the client first. So you better start helping them. Once you help them, then they will offer you other stuff. So don't worry about that. But no work is menial. You have to be hungry to, learn that. And then smart. Of course, there is a lot of creativity, a lot of intelligence, a lot of learnability, a lot of tech skills that you require. All three, are tested at Fractal, and I think most of the industry tests all three as well in analytics. And if you possess these three qualities, the second level is, of course, do you know Azure? Do you know GCP? Do you know what is machine learning? What are the types of algorithms? How will you create a successful use case? So those are there, but those are secondary qualities.
Sure.
And that's why I say,
and those are easier to
exactly.
check off as well. They're sort of qualifying versus differentiating criteria.
Exactly. So we go to IITs, NITs, MBA colleges like IIMs, a lot of analytic universities and so on, right? I think we go to 30, 35 campuses in India every year. Last 2 years, we've hired about 2,000 people from campus.
Wow.
And the fact is, out of currently Fractal is about 4,000, I think 100 less or something. Out of the 4,000, 2,000 people have joined in the last 2 years, and they've never met any other Fractalite.
Right.
They are at their home. They've never visited a Fractal office. They've never met anybody, and they are being successful. So it does show us something, right? That something is right in the ecosystem.
Very interesting. And could you, so thank you for laying that out. And I think that's very important. I think very often people get very caught up in the, in the technical qualification or the qualification part, but I think what you've laid out very importantly is about the personality and the human aspects, which is much more than a tuple. So that was very helpful. Give me some flavor, unpack for me a little bit about within, if people have those traits that you just mentioned, those three traits, given and particularly perhaps for the MBA level hires, if you could give me some feel for what you're looking for, because you do have this domain specificity challenge, you do have this analytics, challenge. So do you look for MBA level, in the MBA level hires, do you look for people who have domain specific experience as well as analytics, or do you look for, people who are sort of, capabilities in each of those areas and then you put them together in a team?
Right. So for, I think one clarification I would like to make, right, and this is unfortunate in the world today, right? The higher you rise, people say, I'm going to be hands off or I'm going to be a manager, right? That world has gone. There is no such position available where you're a manager. You can be a reporting manager, you can manage P&Ls, you can manage clients, you can manage customers, but that's not the job. The job is to deliver value. And to deliver value, you will need to be hands-on. you're fully hands-on. Everybody needs to be hands-on. Even our CEO makes slides, everybody is making software, slides, PowerPoints, videos, there is a lot of impact that you need to generate. So that's the basis. Now, if you look at that basis, now you go to an MBA program and say, hey, what have you learned? You've learned how to work in a difficult organization. You understand the business models, hopefully, right, after the MBA. So you can easily plug into any industry. If you are if you have done 2 years in, let's say, CPG, but hopefully you can also learn banking, right? And you can implement analytics in banking. That's the expectation we would have from an MBA. What else have they learned? Have they learned some analytics? Can they implement analytics? Can they work with people? Can they work with large, complex, ambiguous problem statements and narrow their way out of that to a specific problem statement and then solve that problem? Those 2-3 skills are, I think, differentiating an MBA from maybe an engineer, right? An engineer is a very hardcore professional who we have to teach, how to navigate complexity, how to, talk to senior stakeholders. Hopefully, MBA folks have already done that, and we don't have to train them a lot. We have to, shorten the training cycle to maybe 3 months, not 6 months or a year. So that's the thing we would. I don't think domain really matters that much because, you can spend 30 years in a domain and still know nothing about it. That's how I would think, right? I have spent 15 years in chemical engineering, in manufacturing, consumer goods, retail. But when a retailer talks to me, right, I feel like I know nothing because it's evolving so fast. Even like CEOs of Colgate and P&G, and they are worried, right? They are not sleeping at night saying, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So domain is learnable, I feel. That's
So give us a flavor for what the sort of team structure is like. If, for example, in traditional consulting, there would be analysts, there would be consultants, there would be project managers, practice area principals, partners, and so on. Right? How does that? What's the sort of equivalent of that in analytics consulting, and where do you typically slot in your MBAs, presumably who have some work experience before their MBA? I know in India we have a lot of people who have a degree called an MBA, but they're sort of pretty much analysts because of the lack of work experience. But
See, so in a way, the traditional structure has evaporated now in analytics. If you look at just take a sample project of 20 people, right? 20 people working on a Fortune 100 client for one, let's say, supply chain problem. Now, of course, all 20 people won't understand supply chain. So that's a given. And all 20 people won't understand the domain, which is the industry, right? So we want to marry the skill set here. Have a vertical or industry domain expert who's been there for 20, 30 years, who understands everything. Have a supply chain, expert who's like a client partner or supply chain head or somebody like that, who's done this for many years. So those two are the knowledge experts. Then we have the execution team, which is there's a program manager who has managed, $5 million, $10 million projects, all the program management, talking to, CEOs, CXOs, managing the complexities, the contracts, the project management, the people management, deliverable quality, all of that is, at a program manager level. That person is pretty senior as well. Then there is a, junior team, which is data consultants who have worked on the data in supply chain for a few years, 5, 10 years or something. Then there are engineers who worked on the softwares. How do they build the models? How do they visualize on some software like Tableau, Spotify, or AWS, GCP have their own softwares as well, right? And also build machine learning models. So these are you can call them engineers or data scientists or a merger. If there's a very large program, then we'll have 3-4 data engineers, 3-4 data scientists, so a very large 8-7 member tech team. Then you have designers who are problem framing with the end consumer. These are design strategists, design researchers, process designers, service designers, who actually conduct primary research and secondary research with the stakeholders. This is a very standard part of consulting now, analytics consulting now, which always used to be part of consulting. And then, apart from all of these, there is a PMO, of course, who's managing the timelines and all of that. So that's the usual structure of a team: data engineering, data science, so the horizontal knowledge and the vertical knowledge, and then program management and project management. Now, if you think of an MBA, I would think they should be in either domain knowledge or horizontal knowledge if they have done that in the past. If they've done banking in the past 5 years, then they would be sort of the expert in that. Or they've done supply chain, then they would be sort of the expert. Or if they have pivoted their career path and say, I want to become the best data scientist in the world, which is frankly there, right? Many senior people in Fractal, they are like MBAs and they've done many degrees, but they want to just do data science and they are amazing at that, right? So if you want a career path of that, then of course pursue that. Or program management. Some people really get a kick out of I want to run a $10 million program for the next 1 year. I want to see success, right? That's a very deep skill. Program management is underrated, I feel. Maybe MBAs are really good at that as well, managing complexities, people, software, technology, stakeholders, visiting clients, traveling, all of that is part of that game. So maybe I think program management is closer to what I think they're looking for as well.
Great. That I think really helps and gives, also addresses, I guess, the to a very large part addresses the next question, which was sort of where, what the progression paths are, which I think you've very well.
So there are just to give you an example, right? There are 50-year-old client partners and there are 20-year-old client partners in Fractal. So it doesn't matter on how much experience you have, what is your age, what is your degree, qualification. After a point, and you can guarantee this, right?
Yeah.
After 3 years out of college, all of this won't matter. It's on you and you alone. How much impact have you created and how much hunger you have to grow? If you want to become the CEO in 5 years, it's possible. But you have to do the right things, and it's possible. I had a colleague in, I take this example all the time. I had a colleague in Colgate 10 years back, colleague as in client in Colgate 10 years back, Colgate headquarters. I used to work for Colgate quite a lot. So, and we used to have these chats, and he was a 58-year-old person doing analytics, and he was not as senior as I would have thought he should be, right? He was like the best in Colgate at analytics. And I said, why are you stuck here? And he said, do you know Ian Cook? And I said, yeah, of course I know. Ian Cook is the global CEO of Colgate 10 years back. And he said, Ian and I were in class together. And I said, what? I couldn't believe it. I'm like, so you're of the same age, same class. And I'm like, yeah. We are the same thing. 20 years ago, Colgate leadership had asked me and Ian together in a room, which career path do you want? And I said, I don't want to grow vertically. I want to grow horizontally. I wanted the best analytics person in Colgate. And that's what I am. And Ian said, I want to be the CEO. And that's what he is. And we have, of course, put all our sweat and hard work. And of course, there's a little bit of difference in compensation, obviously, but it's not, world changing. But I don't have the, title, but I have the satisfaction and I know what I want and I got it. And of course, he got what he wants. So the example here is, you have to really choose at some point, what do you want? And you can't do everything. You can't be the CEO and the best data scientist in the world and the best data engineer and the best program manager. It's not possible. It's not a decision to be made today, but 5 years from now, you will have to make that decision. And at that point, engineering, MBA, all of this would matter much less. It will be your personality, hunger, humility, smart, and all of that.
That's a very interesting point and very relevant to the next, and perhaps we can make that the last question given time. In your reflections, just perhaps that example, and it may be that there are a couple of different answers to this. Perhaps it's different for if you're following the technical, data scientist path, or the program manager path, or the client partner path. But if you could give us a sense of, from your perspective, what sets apart the people who have very rapid trajectories, the 20-year-old partners, for example, or others? What sets them apart? What is, are there some common traits or patterns that you abstract, if you share.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. It's a very good question. First, I think don't underestimate the power of hard work in the first few years of your career. The first 3, 4, 5 years, don't say no to anything. And it may seem like I'm doing this is not what I want to do, and just forget all of that. Just spend 3, 4 years dedicated to one company or two companies max in one role, and find a leader who you believe in, and just follow them blindly. Don't worry about promotion and money. It will come later. And this is the only thing I have seen which makes a huge difference. If you start worrying about the money and the promotion and type of work in the first 3 years, for the next 10 years you'll keep switching, and then you will land up somewhere. But that journey will be very painful for you. Versus if you stick to some leader and the job and you learn, it becomes a trait, and everybody sees what you're doing. Believe me, everybody knows what you're doing. You can't hide anything in the world. Everybody knows what you've done, what you're doing, and how much hard work you have, how much hunger you have. And there are sleepless nights, even we have today also, right? So all of that is a given. It's table stakes, and considering the population in the world, right? The hard work is not a place to compete on, but the clarity on I want to do this for the rest of my next 10 years, 20 years, and stick to some leadership, and then keep learning. And when I mean hard work, I mean like hands-on hard work, right? It's not just coordination, or it's not just video making and stuff, right? It is learning the job and becoming the best at it. If you are an engineer, or if you want to be, let's say, a data scientist, become the best data scientist. And it will take a lot of energy. You can't, like, India has an amazing set of data scientists. India has an amazing set of leaders on your CEOs. India has an amazing list of program managers. So there's a lot of people who are good, and you can also become good if you follow their journeys, and if you stick to ideals, and really spend the energy in that direction. Don't keep changing paths in the first 5 years. That would be my advice. 50-60% people just keep doing that, and they suffer in the long term. They don't get what they're looking for. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That was very sage advice, which the Sardar in me would translate roughly to Thandrak.
Exactly.
कहीं जल्दी पहुंचना है तो थोड़ा सोच.
Yes.
So
exactly.
That's fabulous. Thank you so much, Sagar. I think I would love to keep the conversation going, but I want to be very mindful of your incredibly valuable time. I'm so grateful for you taking out time, and for all of the support that you've and insights that you continue to provide us, and encouragement you continue to provide us as we are at early stages in this journey of co-creating with you this new one-year MBA. So we would dearly love to have further future interaction with you. But for today, thank you so much for this fabulous set of insights and perspectives on the analytics consulting space and careers, the vast multitude of career trajectories that it seems to be able to offer. Thank you so much for your time, Sagar.
It was a pleasure talking to you guys, and hopefully we'll keep talking. Good luck, everyone.
Thank you.